Get up, Liam said, his voice low yet resonant with authority. I don't like seeing people kneel. That is the act of the weak. Thanksgiving night settled over Greenwich, Connecticut under a veil of biting frost. The outdoor temperature had dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 degrees Celsius, turning each breath into white vapor the moment it left the lungs. The Stone Creek mansion rose up like a fortress of brilliant light, completely separated from the cold darkness surrounding it. The vast front courtyard of the estate was already packed with symbols of power and wealth. Gleaming Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedans, several Bentleys, and the latest Range Rovers sat motionless, their metallic paint reflecting the lavish chandelier light spilling out from the large windows. That luxury radiated arrogance, daring anything inferior to come near. Yet that perfect picture was suddenly broken. A gray 2015 Ford Explorer, its paint already dulled by years of wind and frost, slowly rolled through the gate. The slightly rumbling engine sounded painfully out of place amid the hushed stillness of the upper class. The vehicle slipped past the expensive giants, searching for the most hidden, darkest corner near the bushes to park, as if it knew its presence was not welcome here. Inside the car, the pale yellow glow from the dashboard illuminated Liam's angular face, marked with fatigue. He turned off the engine, and the silence became suffocating. Liam adjusted the collar of his cheap dress shirt, then lifted his eyes to stare at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. He let out a heavy sigh, one that carried the weight of the past and the endurance of the present. His eyes, deep and unreadable, suddenly flashed with a sharp, icy glint. Just 4 more hours to complete 3 years, Liam muttered to himself. His voice was low, free of resentment, more like someone counting down to the final moment of a long-planned operation. He opened the door and stepped outside. The sub-zero cold rushed in instantly, yet Liam seemed not to feel it. In his hand, he carried only a bare bottle of wine, completely devoid of any brand label or elaborate import seal. The black glass bore a thin layer of aged dust, and on it was a single line of neatly handwritten white paint, 1982. Liam tightened his grip on the bottle and walked steadily toward the massive oak doors, from which loud laughter and chatter spilled out, preparing himself to face the storm waiting inside. The heavy oak doors swung open, leading into the main living room of the Stone Creek mansion, a breathtaking space spanning nearly 1,000 square feet, roughly 100 square meters. Under the brilliant golden light cast by 3 enormous Austrian crystal chandeliers suspended from the soaring ceiling, the air was thick with the scent of premium cigars and expensive perfume. The clinking of crystal glasses blended with the lively chatter of the East Coast elite. At the center of the room stood Arthur Harrington. He was surrounded by a circle of businessmen in perfectly tailored Italian suits, a glass of hard liquor in his hand, his face flushed red from alcohol and unrestrained excitement. Arthur was speaking animatedly about the greatest brainchild of his life. "As you all know," Arthur announced loudly, his voice strong enough to drown out every nearby conversation, "the Skyline project isn't just about buildings. It's a $1 billion complex. I'm going to turn that wasteland into the new symbol of Connecticut. Once the first foundation piles are driven next month, the Harrington family's assets won't stop at their current number." A chorus of admiring gasps and praise erupted, perfectly synchronized. Just as Arthur was basking in that moment of glory, Liam stepped inside. His appearance was a jarring, discordant note. In his worn windbreaker and old leather shoes, he looked completely out of place amid the sea of silk and fine tailoring. Liam walked up to his father-in-law, his expression calm. He bowed politely. "Hello, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm sorry I arrived a bit late." He extended his right hand, the most basic gesture of courtesy between men. The room fell abruptly silent. all eyes turned toward the two of them. Arthur stopped laughing. His smile on his face vanished, replaced by a contemptuous smirk. He glanced at Liam's outstretched hand, then casually turned away and took a sip of his drink, as if Liam did not exist. His hand hung in midair, exposed and cold. Arthur slowly set his glass down and turned back toward his son-in-law, but instead of looking into his eyes, he stared past Liam's shoulder toward the window. "Did you park in the back yet?" Arthur's question rang out clearly in the deadly silence of the room. Liam gently lowered his hand and clenched it, yet his voice remained steady. "I parked in the front yard, sir." Arthur gave a dry laugh, a mocking burst that made several people nearby snicker along with him. He jerked his chin, his tone dripping with superiority and disgust. "Go move that thing to the back immediately. Don't let my guests see that pile of scrap metal next to respectable cars. It stains the face of this house." Arthur's words landed like a slap across Liam's face in front of dozens of prying eyes. Yet deep in the eyes of the rejected son-in-law there was no fear, only a coldness that was slowly freezing solid. Liam did not respond to Arthur's sarcasm. He silently swallowed his anger and turned toward Eleanor, his mother-in-law, who sat on a red velvet chair at the center of the room like a queen. She wore an emerald green evening gown, and around her neck hung a pearl necklace whose value was likely enough to buy an entire apartment in the city. He approached her, carefully holding the plain, dusty black bottle of wine in both hands, and gently placed it on the marble cable in front of her. "Mom, I brought a bottle of red wine as a gift for you and Dad to enjoy with dinner," Liam said, maintaining the minimum level of respect owed to his wife's parent. "It may look a bit old on the outside, but what's inside is very special." Eleanor glanced at the bottle as if a cockroach had just crawled onto her elegant banquet table. She pinched the neck of the bottle between two fingers, lifted it, and scrutinized it under the chandelier. The bottle bore no flashy label, no import stamp, no brand logo, only a single handwritten number, 1982, scrawled in white paint that had already yellowed with age. "No label?" Eleanor frowned, her voice sharp and acidic. "Liam, where did you pick this thing up? An expired goods clearance store or a roadside gas station?" Snickers rippled through the surrounding guests. They whispered and pointed at the ugly, nameless bottle sitting awkwardly among expensive champagne and cognac. Liam remained composed, even though his hand was clenched tightly behind his back. This was a legendary 1982 Chateau Petrus, one of the most expensive and rare wines in the world, currently valued at no less than $50,000. He had deliberately removed the label, a simple test to see whether this family possessed the refinement to recognize true value or if they were merely nouveau riche worshippers of appearances. And the answer came immediately. "Fine, then," Eleanor exhaled with open disdain and waved over a servant who was standing nervously in the corner of the room. "Maria, take this sewer water down to the kitchen. Don't serve it to the guests. Someone might get a stomachache. Use it to marinate the lamb. Hopefully the spices will cover up its cheap taste." The servant hurried over, took the bottle, cast an apologetic glance at Liam, and quickly retreated. Liam watched as the $50,000 bottle of wine was carried away to become meat marinade. He did not stop them. He did not explain. Inside him, a deep disappointment arose, but not because of the money. It was because he realized that the blindness and arrogance of these people were beyond any cure. Everyone moved into the grand dining room, where the long mahogany table had been set with a perfection so oppressive it felt suffocating. Flickering candlelight reflected off the solid silver cutlery, intricately engraved, casting cold flashes of light each time someone moved. Liam was assigned a seat at the very end of the table, farthest from Arthur's seat of honor, like a freeloader rather than a member of the family. The air around the table was filled with the rich aromas of roasted turkey, foie gras, and truffles, but to Liam it felt no different from a battlefield where he stood completely unarmed. Arthur, now slightly drunk and intoxicated by the flattery of his business partners, began scanning the table in search of a new form of entertainment. His gaze landed on Liam, who was quietly eating his meal. "Hey, Liam," Arthur called out, his booming voice cutting through the clinking of knives and forks. "How have you been lately? Still burying your face in a computer, writing those pointless blogs teaching people how to live cheaply?" A few giggles rose from his wife's relatives. Arthur wasn't finished. He gleefully delivered another brutal blow. "Honestly, my Skyline project is about to break ground. It's huge. We'll need someone trustworthy to guard the construction site gate. How about I tell the site manager to set you up with a security job? The pay is decent. At least you'd get to wear a proper uniform, better than parading around in those worn-out jackets of yours." The entire table erupted in amused laughter. Mocking eyes converged on Liam like needles. They waited for his embarrassment, his flushed humiliation. But Liam did not flinch. He calmly set his utensils down, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and lifted his head to look straight into his father-in-law's eyes. His gaze was unusually calm, carrying an inner strength no one there recognized. "Thank you for the offer, Dad," Liam replied, his voice steady and clear. "But I'm currently busy with my own work. I'm managing an investment portfolio, a small one." It was the truth, only small to Liam, the man at the helm of Titanium Capital, meant billions of dollars circulating daily across global stock markets. But to the people sitting here, it sounded like empty boasting from an unemployed man. Arthur's eyes widened, then he burst into loud, unrestrained laughter, his chest shaking violently. He slammed his hand on the table, causing wine to slosh out of the glass. "Investing? My God, did you all hear that? A guy driving an old Ford thinks he can invest? What are you investing in? Lottery tickets? Or scraping together my daughter's grocery money to gamble on crypto?" The mocking laughter exploded again, even harsher this time, drowning Liam in absolute isolation among the people called his family. Amid Arthur's vicious laughter and the surrounding crowd, Liam did not fight back. He made only one movement, slowly turning his head to the side towards Sarah, the wife he had loved devotedly for 3 years, who was sitting beside him. Deep in his heart, this was Liam's final chance. He did not need her to stand up and flip the table or openly argue with her father. He needed only a hand squeeze beneath the table, a sympathetic glance, or simply a gentle word to salvage what little dignity her husband had left. Just that one small gesture, and Liam was willing to let everything go, to continue being an ordinary husband, silently protecting her. But Sarah did not look at him. She was furtively watching Arthur's expression. Arthur noticed his daughter's silent plea. He snorted coldly and glanced at the powerful black credit card lying casually beside his wine glass, the very card Sarah used to pay for trips to Paris and expensive Hermes bags. His message was unmistakable. Choose the useless husband or choose this life of luxury. The decision took only a split second. Fear of losing financial support defeated the fragile remnants of marital affection. Sarah took a deep breath and looked up at Liam. Instead of defense, her eyes carried irritation and reproach. "Liam," Sarah said, raising her voice to align herself with her father, "can you stop it already? Don't try to talk about money or business with Dad anymore. Can't you see you're ruining his mood?" Liam froze. He searched his wife's eyes for even a trace of irony, but there was none. She was completely serious. Sarah continued, cruelly driving the blade deeper. "Dad's right. You should just focus on writing your blogs. Getting rich isn't for you." That sentence was a fatal stab, sharper than all of Arthur's insults combined. It severed the final thread binding Liam to this house. In that instant, the space around Liam seemed to darken. The hope and patience that had still lingered in his eyes vanished completely. His dark pupils grew deep and cold, like the surface of the ocean before a violent storm. Love, tolerance, and hope for a home, all of it died right there at this dinner table. Liam said nothing. He merely curved his lips to a faint, colorless smile. He withdrew his gaze from Sarah and returned to the state of a titan observing the chessboard. From this moment on, there was no affection left, only business. The atmosphere at the table grew even more unhinged as alcohol coursed deeper through Arthur's veins. Abandoning all restraint, he stood up and spread his arms wide like a king embracing his dominion, his face flushed red with unrestrained excitement. "Let me let you all in on a little secret." Arthur lowered his voice theatrically, then shouted with renewed enthusiasm. "The Skyline project isn't just a construction project, it's the all-in gamble of my life. This morning, I signed papers mortgaging every asset of the Harrington family, from the Stone Creek mansion to the yacht at the marina to every single share I own." The room erupted in shock. Arthur laughed arrogantly. "Don't worry, I secured a $500 million credit line from the bank. Once the groundbreaking announcement goes public next week, Harrington Group's stock will triple. By then, we won't just be rich, we'll be gods in this state of Connecticut." Thunderous applause followed, praising the tycoon's audacity. But at the end of the table, Liam did not clap. He sat motionless, eyes narrowed in calculation. Numbers, data, and risks raced through his mind like a quantum computer. The professional conscience of a top-tier investor, or perhaps the last trace of compassion he still felt for this family, pushed him to speak. "Dad?" Liam's voice rang out, low and cold, cutting through the celebratory clinking of glasses. "I've reviewed the legal files on the Skyline project land. It's not as clean as you think. That area is under scrutiny by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency for underground chemical leakage. Federal-level litigation documents have already been prepared and could be filed at any time." The room fell silent. Liam locked eyes with Arthur, emphasizing every word. "If that news breaks while you're carrying a $500 million debt, Harrington stock won't triple, it will drop to zero. You'll lose everything." It was a warning worth billions of dollars, confidential information known only to those at the very top of the financial tower. But in Arthur's eyes, and in the eyes of the intoxicated opportunists around him, it was nothing more than the jealous rant of a failed man. The air in the banquet room seemed to be sucked dry after Liam's sharp warning. The guests stood frozen, exchanging stunned, uneasy looks, suddenly afraid of the financial catastrophe that had just been spoken aloud. But Arthur was different. His wounded pride, mixed with alcohol, turned him into a feral beast completely out of control. Arthur's face shifted from flushed red to a sickly purple. He could not accept that a son-in-law he had always regarded as a kept man living off his wife would dare lecture him in front of his strategic partners. Bang! Arthur slammed his fist down on the table, sending plates and bowls jolting upward, wine sloshing and spilling across the pristine white tablecloth like spreading bloodstains. He crumpled the napkin in his hand and hurled it straight at Liam's face with utter contempt. "You dare curse me?" Arthur roared, his voice cracking with rage, a trembling finger pointing straight at Liam. "You're jealous because I'm about to succeed big, aren't you? A penniless loser who's been freeloading off his wife's family for 3 years dares teach a billionaire how to make money. Get out! Get out of my house right now!" The shouting echoed throughout the mansion. All eyes turned toward Liam, waiting for the familiar display of weakness. Liam did not dodge the napkin. He let it strike lightly against his chest before falling to the floor. He slowly turned to look at Sarah one last time. But what met his gaze was only ruthless coldness. Sarah turned her face away, pretending to adjust her hair, silently agreeing with her father's order to throw him out. She had chosen a side, and it was not her husband's. Liam gave a slight nod, a nod of acceptance rather than submission. He stood up and calmly brushed the front of his jacket as if shaking off the final layer of filth this family had left on him. He raised his wrist to check the time. At that exact moment, the large grandfather clock in the corner of the room began to chime. Dong, dong. Exactly midnight. Time's up, Liam said softly, his voice light but perfectly audible in the silence. 3 years as a live-in son-in-law, 3 years of endurance in obedience to his late father's wish to temper his character, officially ended at this very second. He pushed his chair back and walked away, his back perfectly straight. Just before stepping out of the dining room doorway, Liam paused for a beat, did not turn around, and spoke one cold sentence that drove itself deep into the hearts of those who heard it. "I'll go, but remember this moment clearly. You are the one who just drove away the only person in this world who could have saved you." Liam stepped out through the oak doors of the Stone Creek mansion, leaving behind the fake warmth of yellow lights and the noisy laughter. The -2 degrees Celsius cold of Connecticut immediately wrapped around him, but this time it carried the refreshing sensation of freedom, no longer the lonely bitterness he felt when he arrived. He walked past the old Ford Explorer parked quietly in the darkest corner. He did not stop. That car, like the role of the useless son-in-law he had played for 3 years, had fulfilled its historical mission. Suddenly, from the darkness of the driveway leading to the mansion, 2 beams of cold white LED light swept through the night mist, tearing apart the night mist. A V8 engine roared with deep, commanding power, utterly unlike the noisy hum of the Ford. A jet-black Cadillac Escalade, a B-7 level armored vehicle typically used for heads of state, rolled majestically into the courtyard. It stopped directly in front of Liam, massive and domineering, completely overshadowing the luxury cars of the Harringtons. The rear door swung open. A man in a black suit wearing a professional earpiece stepped briskly out. He hurried around the vehicle and bent forward at a full 90-degree bow before Liam, his demeanor showing the utmost reverence, as if welcoming an emperor. "Welcome back, Mr. Chairman." Liam gave a slight nod, removed his worn windbreaker, tossed it to the driver, and stepped into the vehicle. The door closed with a solid click, sealing off the outside world completely. Inside the Cadillac was a modern mobile office. Liam sat back into the premium leather seat and opened a specialized laptop that was already powered on. The blue glow of the screen illuminated his face, sharpening his strong, resolute features. On the screen was not some trivial blog page, but the interface of a Bloomberg terminal with thousands of numbers flashing wildly. On the corner of the screen, the logo of a silver lion stood proudly beside the words, Titan Capital. Liam J., a name that made all Wall Street tread carefully. He was not unemployed. He was the founder and operator of Titanium Capital, the largest and most ruthless short-selling hedge fund in the North American financial market. They called him the Silent Titan for his noiseless hunting style and lethal strikes. Liam lightly tapped his fingers on the keyboard, his eyes locked onto the stock ticker of the Harrington Group. The predator had awakened. The next morning at exactly 9:30 a.m., the opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange rang out, signaling another bustling trading day. But inside the headquarters of Titanium Capital, the atmosphere was terrifyingly calm. Dozens of elite traders sat before multi-screen setups, headsets on, fingers hovering over keyboards, awaiting orders from their supreme commander. Liam stood before a glass wall overlooking Lower Manhattan, holding a cup of black coffee with no sugar. Without turning around, he issued a short command into the internal microphone. "Activate Operation Crush. Begin." Immediately, Titanium's communications director pressed send. A thick dossier titled Environmental Violations and Lead Contamination Risk at the Skyline Project was delivered straight to the priority inbox of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Less than 15 minutes later, a sensational headline appeared on the front page of the world's most respected financial newspaper's digital edition. Skyline disaster. Harrington Group accused of deliberately hiding federal-level contamination. At the same time, Liam issued another order to the trading team. Short all Harrington stock, ticker HRG. Take it down. On the electronic board, HRG, trading at $80 per share, began flashing violently in red. Massive sell orders from Titanium Capital flooded the market like a bombing raid. Retail investors panicked and fled. Pension funds dumped shares to cut losses. The Harrington Group stock chart plunged vertically like a sheer cliff. $80, $65, $42. The exchange was forced to trigger circuit breakers twice, halting HRG trading due to the extreme drop. But the moment trading resumed, the free fall continued unchecked. News of Arthur mortgaging all his assets poured fuel on the fire, convincing the market that Harrington was heading for bankruptcy. In just 2 fateful hours, the market capitalization of a long-standing construction empire completely evaporated. HRG hit rock bottom at $5 per share, a brutal, clean, merciless kill. Liam stared at the glaring red $5 on the screen, his face expressionless. But deep inside, he knew one thing. The arrogance of his former in-laws had just been repriced to its true value: trash. If the stock market crash was a nuclear explosion, then what followed was the tsunami that wiped out every remaining trace. Inside the chairman's office of Harrington Group, telephones rang incessantly, but these were no longer congratulatory calls or project invitations like yesterday. They were the sounds of death. Chase Bank and Bank of America, the 2 largest creditors, moved immediately with the cold-blooded efficiency of capitalist machinery. Because Arthur had mortgaged everything, from real estate and yachts to personal shares, to secure the massive credit line, the collapse of HRG stock obliterated the capital safety ratio. The most dreaded term in finance was officially issued: margin call. Mr. Harrington, the voice of the bank's risk director came sharply through the phone, stripped of all courtesy. 90% of your collateral value has evaporated. Under the contract terms, we demand an immediate cash injection of $200 million to maintain the loan. Otherwise, we will freeze and liquidate all pledged assets. "You're insane!" Arthur screamed, sweat pouring down his face, his hands shaking as he gripped the phone. "Give me 24 hours once the rumors die down. You have 30 minutes. Either the money or everything is gone." The line went dead. Before he could recover, alerts poured in one after another. Personal accounts frozen, credit cards blocked. In total panic, Arthur frantically scrolled through his contacts. He remembered his closest friends, the partners who had toasted with him over Petrus just last night, the very people who had laughed at Liam with him. He called George, chairman of a local bank. The number was unreachable. He called Robert, a real estate mogul. "Sorry, Arthur, I'm in a meeting," Robert said curtly, then hung up. He called again and again, but only endless dial tones or cold rejections answered him. In the world of old money, friendship is measured by value. When Arthur was a mighty lion, they gathered to stroke his mane, but when he was wounded and fell, they scattered faster than rats fleeing a sinking ship. No one wanted to be associated with a bankrupt man under EPA investigation. The office door burst open. The family's personal lawyer rushed in, pale as death. "Sir, the court has just issued an order to seize the Stone Creek mansion. They're sealing the gates. We've lost everything." The phone slipped from Arthur's hand, crashing onto the floor and shattering. He collapsed into his chair, eyes vacant, staring into nothingness. The domino effect had completed its cycle. The Harrington empire collapsed in a single morning. Amid the funereal atmosphere that blanketed the ruins of the Harrington family, the elderly lawyer stepped forward and placed a thin file folder on the table in front of Arthur. His face was grave, unable to hide his sympathy for his client. "Sir," the lawyer said carefully, "I've contacted all the major investment funds in New York seeking a bailout, but the moment they heard the name Harrington and the EPA lawsuit, every single one of them shook their heads. They consider your debt toxic." Arthur collapsed forward, burying his head in his hands, his voice filled with despair. "So that's it. I'm finished. I'll end up in prison for credit fraud." "There is still a glimmer of hope," the lawyer hesitated. "There is one single entity willing to acquire all of this bad debt. They are willing to assume the legal risks in exchange for full ownership of all your collateralized assets. It's the only way for you to avoid going to jail." Arthur jerked his head up like a drowning man grabbing onto a piece of driftwood. Who would be insane enough to be that generous? The lawyer flipped open the final page of the file. Titanium Capital. The name rang out like a foreign bell to Arthur, but it struck Sarah's mind like a bolt of electricity. She stood frozen in the corner of the room. Titanium Capital. Titanium. She had seen that name somewhere before, not in the newspapers, but in a place far closer, far more familiar, inside this very house. A sudden intuition drove Sarah to sprint upstairs, rushing into Liam's old bedroom, the place where she had stuffed all of his belongings into a cardboard box, preparing to throw them away. She frantically rummaged through it, tossing aside worn shirts and thick economics books she had once dismissed as boring. Then her hand touched a worn, tattered leather wallet lying at the bottom of the box. Trembling, she opened it. Inside there was no cash, only a pitch-black business card made of cold, luxurious metal, completely at odds with the cheap wallet. Sarah lifted the card, her eyes opening wide, her breath catching in her throat. Against the mysterious black background, silver-embossed letters gleamed with unmistakable clarity. Liam J., founder and CEO, Titanium Capital. The world around Sarah seemed to collapse. She could not believe her eyes. The husband she had despised as useless and dependent, the man her entire family had humiliated the night before, was in fact the financial titan standing behind the investment fund, now holding the fate of the entire Harrington family. Sarah's legs gave out. The business card slipped from her fingers and struck the wooden floor with a dull, dry sound. She crumpled down beside the pile of old belongings, tears pouring out uncontrollably. She had not merely driven away a husband who loved her, she had personally thrown away a giant she had spent her entire life searching for. The private elevator shot upward to the 88th floor of One World Trade Center, the roof of the Western Hemisphere. When the elevator doors opened, the Harrington family stepped into an entirely different world, a world of absolute power overlooking the vast, bustling city of New York below. But these visitors no longer carried the glamour of the previous night's banquet. Arthur wore a wrinkled suit, dark circles under his eyes from sleeplessness and panic. Eleanor wore no jewelry, her face lined with anxiety that even heavy makeup could not conceal. Sarah walked last, haggard and dazed, her swollen eyes red from crying. They came as defeated losers, prepared to kneel and beg some elder tycoon of Titanium Capital to grant them a way to survive. They were led by a secretary into the largest conference room. The room was immense, surrounded on all sides by transparent reinforced glass. At the far end of the room, behind a massive, polished black ebony desk, a man sat in a high-backed chairman's chair, his back to the door, silently gazing out at the Hudson River. "Mr. Chairman," Arthur spoke up, his voice trembling, his posture pitifully submissive. "We are the Harrington family. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We are deeply grateful that you purchased the debt." Silence filled the room for several seconds. The faint whistling of wind outside the thick glass was the only sound. Then the leather chair slowly rotated. Time seemed to stop. Arthur's mouth fell open, his eyes bulging as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. Eleanor raised a hand to cover her mouth to suppress a scream of terror. The man sitting in that chair, dressed in a finely tailored bespoke suit and exuding a cold, regal aura, was none other than Liam. Not the poor son-in-law who drove a Ford, but a true titan of Wall Street. "Hello, family," Liam said calmly, yet his voice struck their ears like thunder. "Liam?" Arthur stammered, his legs giving way as he clutched the edge of the desk. How can it be you?" The shock was so overwhelming that it jolted Sarah awake from her stupor. She burst into sobs, the instinct of a wife surging forth as she rushed toward the desk. Liam, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were—" But before she could reach the desk, two large bodyguards emerged from the shadows, coldly blocking her path and pushing her back. Liam raised one hand in a signal, his eyes on Sarah devoid of any warmth. "Keep your distance. This is an office, not your living room." Sarah stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She stared at the man before her, the man who had once cooked, cleaned, and endured every humiliation for her, now impossibly distant, like a god standing atop Mount Olympus, forever beyond her reach. Liam interlaced his fingers on the desk, his sharp gaze sweeping across his former in-laws. "Don't misunderstand. I didn't buy your bad debt out of sentiment or because of that dead-on-arrival family relationship." He paused briefly, letting every word sink deeply into them. "I bought it simply because it was cheap. Your assets now belong to Titanium Capital. The game is over." The atmosphere in the conference room sank, heavy as lead. Arthur Harrington, the man who once ruled Connecticut with an iron hand, now trembled uncontrollably, his legs unable to support him. He slowly collapsed onto the cold floor in front of Liam, his hands clasped together in desperate supplication. "Liam, I beg you, take your revenge on me however you want. Send me to prison if you must. But please don't throw Sarah and her mother out onto the streets. They don't know how to survive on their own." Liam stood up and did not look at the man kneeling at his feet. He walked slowly toward the floor-to-ceiling glass and looked down at New York City, where millions of people were rushing about, struggling to make a living. "Get up," Liam said, his voice low yet resonant with authority. "Yesterday, I brought you a bottle of Chateau Patrouille 1982 worth $50,000. You treated it like trash and used it to marinate barbecue meat. I warned you about the legal risks of Skyline to save you from a $500 million debt. You threw a towel in my face and kicked me out of your house in the middle of winter." Liam paused for a beat, his voice becoming harder than ever. "My poverty over the past 3 years was merely a test I imposed on myself, but your ignorance and arrogance were real. It was that arrogance that killed the Harrington family, not me." The entire room fell dead silent. Sarah lowered her head, tears splashing onto the floor, each word from Liam rubbing salt into her heart. Liam picked up a blue folder from the desk and lightly tossed it toward Arthur. "However," Liam said quietly, "I am not a devil. I will not throw you out onto the streets." Arthur trembled as he opened the folder. It was not a court summons, but property deeds and bank documents. "I have repurchased your grandparents' old house in suburban Ohio. It's small and old, but warm enough to keep out the rain and wind. And this is a lifetime education trust fund I have established for Sarah's future children, if she has any. They will receive a proper education without worrying about tuition." Sarah looked up, her eyes wide in disbelief. She could not comprehend that after everything she had done, Liam still cared about the future of children she had not even born yet. "But remember this clearly," Liam said sternly, cutting off their thoughts. "The Harrington Group, the Stone Creek Estate, and all other luxury assets will be seized and auctioned off to fund Titanium's charitable foundation. Starting tomorrow, you will move to Ohio. Work with your own hands to earn a living. Learn to respect the value of money before thinking about how to spend it." With that, Liam pulled a fountain pen from his breast pocket and decisively signed the pre-prepared divorce papers on the desk. He slid them toward Sarah. "Sign it and live well." Liam adjusted the buttons of his suit and walked straight out the door without turning back even once. Sarah watched his solid, solitary figure through the transparent glass. In that moment, she painfully realized that she had lost not only a husband, but a titan, a silent giant who had once held up the entire sky for her, simply because she had been chasing glittering illusions. The elevator doors closed. Liam exhaled a long breath of relief, as if casting off a crushing weight from his shoulders. The elevator plunged downward, carrying him back to the real world. One chapter had ended, and a new era of titanium capital had officially begun.